Welcome, my name is Danny and I'm presenting on behalf of Team 2, one of the in-person teams from Barcelona. And our project looked into if we could identify artist values through their lyrical approach. Songs and art have always been an important part of social movements, and people want to support artists that identify with their own values. So we sought to try to find a way to identify the values based on the content of artist lyrics. This included two components: the song lyrics and the genius annotations. Genius annotations are user-provided content where fans and artists themselves can attempt to decode the meaning behind lyrics, as well as any references to particular social, political, or cultural references. And on top of that, we looked at how we might leverage a large language model to extract the meaning from the data that we gathered and try to interpret it to gain some insights and understand the common themes that artists are demonstrating in their songs. So in order to do this from a technical standpoint, we pulled the lyrics and the annotations from Genius itself via the API. Then we fed them to a large language model with a specific prompt to return for each of these songs in the sample a set of 5 words, as well as a description to reference specifically the reasoning behind the recommended theme from the work. Our sample in this case was 3 quite popular artists, Kendrick Lamar, Lizzo, and Rita Ora. Each of them who have a significant number of genius annotations and lyrics for us to kind of lean into. But we picked 5 songs from each artist and looked at both the lyrics and the themes. So you get 3 artists, 5 songs, 5 themes from the lyrics themselves, and 5 themes from the annotations themselves, which may differ from the lyrics. Here you can see a sample of one of the outputs of the large language model is based on our prompt. So the kind of information that a user might interpret qualitatively to understand the theme of the song. Think of this as a supplement to any annotation that might already exist on the song in more of a value, in a way that's representative of the artist's values. Then in order to interpret that data and plot it along word embedding, we converted it to JSON and fed it into a researching any that were you might imagine many more bubbles on here, but in this case you can see that 2 artists, Lizzo and Rita Ora, are more similar than Kendrick Lamar, who's kind of the standout. And as these axes are kind of numerical, it's not exactly clear from the visualization how you might interpret it, but let's take a deeper look. So here you have the data grouped by song and song theme from the annotations and the lyrics. You can see how similar and different themes represented in the lyrics and annotations are. As a deeper example, you can see some of the similarities. So on the left circle, you see things like self-confidence, individuality, and authenticity grouped closely together. On the right, you see themes from a certain song about accountability and loyalty, as well as the same theme represented in another song, also quite close together. For the same theme, they might differ a little bit based on the other qualitative description that accompanies the main word that represents the theme. In order to improve this moving forward, we identified a few key areas where we might improve. One thing was the scalability. We're relying on third-party tools that have their own limitations, and also some of them are unwilling to provide critical feedback based on the information we provided. Additionally, the annotations must exist to give a critical look at the lyrics, because sometimes the lyrics may not actually represent the true meaning of the artist's intent. That also introduces some subjectivity and bias based on who's interpreting the lyrics and adding their own spin on top of it. That's why Genius is good for giving artist verified lyrics as well. And then, but in general, we believe that this is a good proof of concept and a natural next step in the mission to help fans and artists build new and meaningful relationships and help artists support fans in new ways.
Thank you, and that's your time. We appreciate the presentation. Judges, I see you have your hands raised, so I'll let one of you just jump in. Maybe Alexa, you want to go first?
Yeah, I was just wondering how you were going to handle things that might be perceived as negative connotations culturally. So misogyny, for example.
Yes, so I think that the way that we approached the analysis, it did include some of those things. And we found that in some cases, in some cases we had trouble actually getting that negative sentiment out of the large language model because the models are trained to be hesitant to provide that kind of information. And further, if you are the one calling someone out, you kind of better be confident in the consequences that might have, assuming that there's a chance it could be inaccurate or biased itself. So yeah, that is something that we thought about. It wasn't necessarily in our scope to be able to solve it today, but we did identify as one of the biases that could impact.
As unsexy a space as it might seem, the family area and being able to identify what is truly safe to be listened to in that environment is a major consideration for most platforms. So I think something to kind of bear in mind and factor in is whether or not you could have something that would fulfill that requirement, I think, for people as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, the assessing the appropriateness of something for a certain audience was not a certain way we took it, but that is actually a very good use case as well, so thank you.
If I may squeeze in on that question, using the public chat models like ChatGPT or something is hard to get the negative connotations, but if that would be our goal, we could use already like fine-tune the large language model and then deploy it as our own service, and then to create the proper, not limited in terms of if it's appropriate or inappropriate to tell in the chat, because it's not about conversation with the person, it's more about classifying the lyrics and specific text and then creating one data set rather than having ongoing conversation.
Yeah. Well, congrats, because I think it's a very, very interesting idea. I was wondering if you've thought what other applications or use cases this may have beyond, I mean, the most direct one, which would be recommendation or family control, or have you thought about that by any chance?
Yeah, I can go ahead. And Pavlo, you can chime in as well. When we discussed, we thought that this could be especially useful for brands and organizations who are looking for artists to partner with or also provide their support. There could be a platform or a UI where you could imagine that individuals could follow artists based on the values that they support, and it shows kind of the strength in their community and also the strength in their audience wanting the demand, I guess, for consumers to want to support artists that represent a specific cause. So kind of bridging that gap between brands and organizations and the fans via the artist.
Yeah, I guess I just maybe wanted to repeat that I guess the main reason was to build a system, a platform where you could, where a listener could go and see if he wants or she wants to listen to that artist based on the values from those artists. And we also understand that the lyrics themselves is not like enough to get a real opinions and real values of that artist. Ideally, we would want to extend the data on some kind of interviews from the artists and other data sources that can be like understood as a representation of artists' views. hope it answered the question.
Veronique, you seem to have a question. Would you like to jump in?
I was just wondering how you would tackle that in the case of more mature artists who have maybe 30 years career, long career, who may have different political opinion, values over time.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that would be an interesting way to slice the data. And I think a specific case study especially would be a very interesting thing, especially understanding if people's opinions are becoming more progressive or less so over time, if they're becoming more involved in certain political or social movements, either to the positive or the negative, hopefully to the positive. But yes, that would be, I think, a very interesting way to study this type of data as well.